Welcome to the Wish I'd Known Then podcast, where we focus on how authors found success, looking at strategies that have taken them to the top of the bestseller charts, as well as what they've learned from their mistakes. Because being an indie author is more than knowing the latest marketing trend. It's about being innovative and creative and learning from your mistakes.
Welcome to Wish I'd Known Then podcast. I'm Sara Rosette.
And I'm Jami Albright. And this week on the show, we have us.
We're going to talk about developing story ideas.
We have the best guest ever.
That's right.
We're going to talk about how we develop story ideas, what we wish we'd known about story ideas, what we just wish we, just story in general, you know. Mm-hmm. So I hope it'll be helpful. I hope people will like it. So.
Yeah, it's one of those topics that's very, it's hard to define. Mm-hmm. So we will do our best to describe how we come up with ideas and develop them into a novel.
And then what we do after we have an idea. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, because the ideas are a dime a dozen. That is not that hard.
I got a million ideas.
That's right. All right. So what have you been doing this week?
Well, y'all gonna think I'm just crazy, but nothing. You know, I got home from vacation. I thought, I have another week until my editor sends back my, stuff. So I was going to do some admin stuff and just look, kind of piddle around. And then I remembered on Tuesday that I had just sort of sent bare bones sex scenes. Pardon the pun. I don't know. And anyway, I needed to punch those up, and I had said I was going to, so I had to do that. And then I still have an epilogue to write. And before we started recording, I was like, I don't have an idea. And so Sara gave me an idea. So hopefully I can turn that idea into an epilogue. So
we'll develop that bad boy right out.
That's right. Gosh, that's right. So that's about it. That's about all I've been doing. How about you?
Okay, so last time we talked for an introduction, I said, hey, I'm getting back to writing.
Yeah.
I'm just enjoying it so much. So I just have a really short thing to say. Writing is hard. I'm over the honeymoon period. I'm like, oh my goodness, I forgot this is hard, but that's hard. Okay. It just takes a while. And it's, for me, it's like, I really have to get in there and I feel best if I do a draft and I get in there and I work on it and make it better before I move on. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it has to be kind of in shape. Mm-hmm. And so that just takes a while.
Yeah.
So, but I have words down and it's going fine, but it's just slow.
Are you writing or are you dictating again?
I'm doing dictation, but then I go in and I edit it before I go on, because I feel like it's not really solid until, I kind of have gotten in there and worked on it. So it's like I have a big old mess when I get it transcribed, and then I go in and clean that up. And that's when I do a lot of it's really like a first and second pass, because I kind of clean it up and then I go back and I'll refine it and I'll add some emotion. And
so why don't you, I'm sure people are curious, how do you do your dictation?
Oh, I have Dragon Dictation. I have a little handheld recorder, and I have to think about what I want to talk about. Usually I know I'm going to do one scene and I know how it's going to go. I have like the general idea of the scene, and then I just sit down and I talk for maybe 20, 30 minutes. And it's a lot of stops and starts and pauses and new line. And a lot of times I'll think of something and I'll say, insert this. And then I'll say whatever it was that needs to go up at the beginning of the scene or whatever. And then I transcribe it and get it in. Just usually I'd put it in a notepad and work on it. And then when I get it pretty good, I copy it and paste it into Scrivener. And then from there, I'll work on it again as I go through the drafts. But it just gives me a super rough first draft, and it helps me get all that stuff out of my head onto the paper.
How many words can you get in about 20 or 30 minutes?
It depends. It depends if I really know where the scene's going and I'm talking really fast, it can be 2,000 or 3,000 words, but most of the time it's like 1,000, 1,500.
Still,
So,
that's great. That's great.
yeah. And I feel like I have a lot of it. For me, the first draft is hard because I feel like I know what I want to say, but in like the longer I'm in the longer amount of writing time I have,
right,
I'm really slow at the beginning, but then once I get into it, I can go faster. So I feel like that kind of helps me get to that stage where I've got all the words and I just have to rearrange and refine and figure out what people are doing with their hands and stop them nodding and all that stuff, as I go back through it.
Yes, I know that. I know that feeling. But I think that's encouraging, or it should be encouraging, because you guys, she's not dictating perfectly. Like,
oh no,
and I think that a lot of people think, well, I can't dictate because I can't make it perfect, or I don't, I stop and you can fix it. You can fix it all. Campbell is awake. If you guys hear him in the background, my grandson. So I'm going to close this door a little better and maybe we won't hear him.
Yeah. The other thing on dictation is that it's rough. And a lot of times I'll think of something and I'll go, oh, this would be a better way to say it. And I just say new line and just keep going because, I can just go back out and delete a whole line. So at first I was like trying to do the commands where you go back and say, delete this and insert this. And that just, I was not good at that. So, and it felt so awkward in the beginning. It still feels awkward to me. It's very odd because I feel weird doing dictation, but then I think I'm going to send this book out into the world. So if somebody overhears me, it's okay.
Yeah.
It's very strange though. It took me a long time to get used to it. I still don't feel comfortable with it, but you don't do dictation, right? You've tried it, but
no, I tried it. No, but I was trying to be perfect. So I'm thinking I might go back. That's one thing I really admire about you, Sara. You just try things and then you sort of modify them to make them work for you. Like when you narrated your nonfiction book, you just kind of did it. It wasn't, you didn't have a perfect studio set up. I saw it. But you just did it. And I think that a lot of people get stuck at the, but I can't do it this way kind of thing.
I'm not, and I do have some perfectionist tendencies. So, but I am dogged. I just keep going.
Right.
So, but thank you. That makes me feel good.
You're welcome. All right. Well, let's talk about developing story ideas.
Okay.
What has triggered story ideas for you, Sara?
Okay. Well, I was thinking about this, and most of the time it's a lot of times it's a place, a location, a setting. And a lot of times like travel has inspired the stories I want to write. And so that kind of gets me going and thinking about something. And a lot of my books are very linked to the place. And like the stories come from the setting, like the English Village series, that is all because I traveled to England. I was like, I want to set a book here. So that, and then other times it's been, one time I read an article about this couple. It was back in when the economic downturn happened, I think in 2008. I read an article about a couple that they had to divorce, but they couldn't sell their house. So they had to live in their house together. And they had divided the house into two different sections, and they had like her side and his side. And I just thought that was interesting. And I was like, maybe I could use that. So I used that in my On the Run series. That was like the background of the couple then. And, kind of, I just thought that was an interesting situation.
It's very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And, historical stuff. A lot of times now when I'm reading something, I'll be like, oh, that, something that really happened or a person that really existed, I'll take it and kind of put my own spin on it. So all kinds of different things. And used to, from the news, I would get a lot of stuff, not so much now that I'm doing more historical.
Right.
So, yeah. What about you?
Mine are mostly people trigger things. Like I've been at football games and seen just a random good looking guy standing on the sideline and he just is off by himself. And I'm like, what's his story? And then I'll start making up a story. And, I do that a lot. It's annoying to my husband because he'll lose me for a little while because I'm just like in that. Or at a restaurant, I'll overhear a conversation because I'm a big eavesdropper. What's the point of going out to eat if you're not going to eavesdrop? Really, I just want to say, Karen and Bob, could you speak a little louder? Because I'm getting older and it's harder to hear.
That's the purpose of booths, right?
Yes,
so you can
exactly.
hear people better.
Yeah. I hate it now. They got the plexiglass. That really, really cramps my style. It's not a good style, but yeah. So mostly it's people though. Like I just get characters in my head, and I think what do I want to do? Like what do I want to do with those characters? Or sometimes it's situational, like with Homecoming King. Like I didn't use this at all in the book, but I had this scene of this woman at this pool in a polka dot bikini, like putting her towel down and getting all set. And this football player walking up and seeing her and being like, who is this? And then she turns around and it's this woman that, he has this history with. And that is how that book kind of took shape. That scene is not in there at all. And, but that's kind of how the idea came. It was just a scenario that I saw in my head. So that's usually how my ideas come to me. I don't think I've ever used an idea someone else gave me.
No, me either.
Don't you hate that?
No, a lot of times people will say, I have an idea and you can use it for this book. And I just say, you just go right ahead and write that book.
Write that book, sister. That's all yours. Yeah. So those are the ways that I do it. So what's your process for developing that idea? Like once you have it and you're like, okay, this is the story I'm going to write. How do you like take that little idea or news story or whatever and make it into a novel?
Well, since mine are mystery, I usually have to have the mystery element, and I figure out, who's going to die, who the suspects are. And so I flesh all that out. But this most recent book that I'm working on, I've got the characters first, and it's completely different for me. I've got the characters and I know who they are. And as I'm writing it, I'm getting to know them better.
Right.
And I don't quite have the mystery yet. So it's completely different. And I think that happens over, like, if you have a long writing career, you don't always do it the same way every time. And I think that's why it's hard for us, because, what worked with book 5 may not have been the same thing that worked with book 3. It's just,
I don't think I've ever written any of mine the same.
Yeah.
That could be my problem. I don't know. But yeah. It's all a different process. Yeah.
Yeah. So what do you do?
Well, because I write romance, I usually know the trope. Like if I get a scenario in my head, I'm like, okay, that's this trope, or how can I make these two people, how can I take them and put them in this trope? I do try to write pretty trope centric. Is that a phrase?
Yeah.
Because it's easier, frankly. It's easier to advertise. It's easier to write if I know the trope up front. The books that I've struggled a lot with are the ones that I haven't been real sure about what the trope was, or I've had too many tropes, which has happened to me before. Then I usually I use a critique group. Not a critique group. I'm sorry. I have used a critique group in the past, but I use a brainstorming group. We meet once a month, and I just sort of say, okay, this is my idea. This is what I'm thinking, and then they usually say, no, that's terrible. That's not going to work. And so then we brainstorm, and I love those sessions. I love that. It usually takes us 3 hours, but I love that time because, you can throw out an idea and it's not a good idea, but then that just triggers another idea from somebody else and somebody else. And then by the time you're done, you're like, oh, okay, this is like, you've given me ideas, things I can work off of, and scenes that I can put in. And so that's good. Also, I have been the last couple of books using Romancing the Beats. And so Gwen Hayes, she really has, for a romance, what the beats that need to happen. And so that's usually how I take that idea and spread it over a 70,000-80,000 word novel.
Your brainstorming group, are they people that are all writing in your same genre?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Okay.
They're all romance authors, and two of us write kind of funny romance.
Mm-hmm.
Well, actually, three of us write funny romance. One writes darker, or more angsty, not darker, just more angsty romance. One writes really straight contemporary,
Mm-hmm.
and the other she writes a little bit of everything. She writes some paranormal, she
Mm-hmm.
writes some funny, kind of some funny paranormal, and she's doing some shifter stuff. So, and I think she's done some erotica in the past. So, but we all understand like romance. We understand
Mm-hmm.
what romance readers want. And so when we're brainstorming to those needs, to those readers, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really important because if you ask,
Mm-hmm.
like if you ask me, I
Mm-hmm.
might give you an idea that might work, but it might not.
Right.
Because that's not like my wheelhouse,
Right. But
That's,
you and Danielle have helped me. I mean, I've
yeah,
had
you guys,
stories problems, and in talking to the two of you, and neither of you write romance,
mm-hmm.
you have helped me. So for me personally, talking it
Mm-hmm.
out, because I'm very auditory,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm very extroverted, that really does help
Yeah,
me to get that story out of my head and onto the page.
yeah. But I think it doesn't have to be somebody in your
Mm-mm.
genre, because y'all have helped me too with things
Mm-hmm,
that
mm-hmm.
I'll get stuck on something, or you'll give me like some little tiny character detail that I'm like, oh, that's so good, I can
Right.
work that in,
Right.
So it doesn't have to be, but I think if you're doing the big, like if you're going from an idea to a plot,
Mm-hmm.
that's when it's helpful to have people who really know what you need, because otherwise you can be off in some tangent that doesn't fit what your readers
Right.
are going to want.
And if for me, I want somebody, I mean, when they say it's a terrible idea, they're not trying to change my story though. I don't want somebody that's going to say, if I come in with an idea, they go, no, let's do it this way.
Mm-hmm.
That
Mm-hmm.
doesn't help me.
Right.
So it's better because I want them to be my ideas.
Mm-hmm.
I just need them to help me kind of flesh them out.
Yeah. Okay. So next up, we wanted to talk about how much of the story do you know when you start writing?
Well,
is that a trick question?
No, it depends. Some books I know more than others.
I think you have a unique challenge because your books are different characters every time.
Yes. It
Yeah.
is. Well, yes, but on the other hand, you have to be really fresh and keep your characters in new situations. So yeah. I mean, it's tricky, but usually I know the beginning, the middle, and the end.
Mm-hmm.
And if I know those things, I can write to them.
To each point.
Yeah. I have 2 books now that I've written. I've written the first 20,000 words because I'm really pretty good at beginnings, and I'm really pretty good at endings. But it's that middle part, that I really struggle a bit with. But twice now I've known from the midpoint to the end how the book will go. So I've stopped at 20,000 words, skipped to the middle, written from 20,000 words to the end, and then gone back and filled in, which has been a little bit easier for that middle, kind of soggy middle part.
Yeah.
Because I already know what's happening. But I am a discovery writer, so I don't really know what happens until I write the book. I mean, as I'm in there, and I've told this story a million times, Rachel Aaron that did,
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. The 2K to 10K. Yeah.
She talks about, writing a little synopsis, handwriting it before you start. And that's a great idea. And so I did it, spent 30 minutes on it, wrote the first sentence, and went, oh, now I know what happens. And it was nothing that was on that paper. And so,
right.
But for me, if I know the beginning, the middle, and the end, that's usually enough. And then I usually have some funny scenes that I think, oh, that would be funny, I'll put that in. They don't all make it into the book. Like Rockstar, there was a scene that I really wanted in the barn. You know, it's a naked trip to the barn where she's got a trench coat on. I really wanted that scene in the barn, in the book, but it just, there was no place for it. So that's my freebie at the end of the book. I wrote that scene because I really wanted it. And, but that's what I give away now. So that's me. How about you?
Well, I have to know the mystery. I usually know like who's going to get killed, who the suspects are going to be.
Right.
And then because it's a mystery, I want to know how all those people are connected to the person who dies. So that and then that way I'm figuring out motives. And then I have to figure out how my sleuth is connected to all those people, because she's got to have a way to talk to them. So if I can figure that stuff out before, that helps me. It makes it easier, and there's less rewriting. So I usually know all that. And I will know like, this is going to happen in the first half. This is going to happen in the middle. This is going to happen at the end. And sometimes the end is a little fuzzy and like, I'm not quite sure. And each thing is kind of fuzzy, but as I get closer to it, it begins to clear up. You know what I mean? Like that quote about writing a book is like driving at night. You know, you can only see as far as your headlights show you, but you can make it the whole way. So that, and I'm very linear. So I'll start at the beginning and usually just write straight through, because that's how my brain works. But like, I don't do a super detailed outline. I don't do, you know, one of those 30,000 word outlines, because that's too much for me. I can't. And I've discovered,
I'm done after that. Like if I were to do that, I'd be done.
Yeah. And I've discovered that as I'm writing, I do get to know the characters much better.
Yes.
And I used to, with my first couple of books, I had to do these long character profiles where I wrote out, you know, stuff about their childhood and their parents. And then when I actually got into writing the book, the characters turned out different. And I was like, why am I wasting my time doing that? So now I just do little sketches. I kind of have just some general stuff about them. If that, sometimes I'll just have a name, and then I just go from there. And then as I'm writing, these things happen and they turn into somebody that I was like, oh, that's cool. I had no idea. And I don't know where that comes from.
Right.
But,
well, I mean, that's just creativity. And, you know, people who have these long outlines, I love them because it gives them a path and a map to follow. And that's great for them. We're just all different. And I think if nothing else, that this should tell you what tools do you use to help you, like with that, you know, kind of the road maps and road signs?
I do, like I've done a whole bunch of different ways. I've used note cards. I've used like a big sheet of paper to do a mind map. I'm doing a thing with Ryan from Plotter. I'm creating a kind of a template for a cozy that has like the major points you need to hit. So I do things like that, but it seems to change
with each book.
Yes, it does for me. And certain things work better for certain books. And I've used online stuff. I've used Trello to like organize my thoughts, because it's very visual, kind of like a Pinterest type thing where you can put images in there. So yeah, I'm kind of all over the map with that.
Like I said, I've used Romancing the Beats the last couple of books, and I usually, like, sometimes even after I've written the book, after I've written the first draft, I'll use Romancing the Beats to go in and just make sure I have hit those points. But I also use like a poster board with sticky notes on it. And so pink's her, blue's him, and that way I kind of can help myself. I don't follow all of those things, but I do follow a lot of them once I get them on that sticky note. But it's later in the process. It's not when I first start. I mean, I have to really get to know them better. That's probably why it takes me so daggum long to write a book.
I keep notes like if I finish a scene, I keep a little note. Like sometimes it's just at the bottom of my document, like whatever that I wrote that day, at the bottom, it'll say like these cryptic things. They'll have like 3 or 4 things. There's like restaurant, finds letter, you know, all these things that nobody would understand. But for me, it's like, oh yeah. So the next thing that's going to happen is these 3 things or whatever, or go back and fix later on, you know, that this guy's name is really Larry, not John, or something like that.
I know. Well, and like my desk is covered in sticky notes with little notes like that. Like right now I have a note that says add that he doesn't like sugar, or add that he won't eat sugar earlier in the book. I sent it to my editor, and after I sent it, I was like, I meant to go back and add that. So now I have to go in and add that because it's a point later in the book, and she'll probably catch it. But yeah, I mean, it's just things like that. Or Sienna was 8. That's what it says. Sienna was 8. 8 for what, Jami? But I knew what it was. But there are times that I look at it and go, I have no idea what this is. Did somebody else write this? It wasn't me. I don't know. But
obviously, it wasn't important.
Yeah, not important.
Not anymore.
Not anymore.
So, well, is there anything that you wish you'd known about developing story ideas?
So much. Sit back, kids. We're going to talk for a while. I had great teachers. Carla Rossi and Stacy Purcell. They were great teachers for me. They were my RWA buddies. They were my critique buddies, and many more. But they really taught me story. They taught me how to craft a story. Like, I can tell a story, but they taught me how to craft and write a story. And I really have to give them lots and lots of props for that. But what I didn't know is that a story can change, and it's okay if it changes. It's okay to walk away from a story if it's not working, and it's not gonna work, or if how do I say this? Because sometimes you just need to stick it out. Like sometimes you just need to stick out the hard thing. And I tend to, when it gets hard, I tend to I want to start changing things to make it easier. But sometimes you have to scrap 50,000 words.
Yeah.
Start over because you just have missed the mark. I wish I had known that just because this book is hard to write doesn't mean it's a bad book. It just means that it was hard to write. And I wish I had known that readers they cannot tell a book that was hard to write from a book that was easy to write.
Yeah.
They can't. And I think if I had known those things earlier, I might not have panicked so bad. In the beginning and stuff. I mean, this book I just finished, it took me forever, but I feel like there were a lot of extenuating circumstances. It wasn't the panicking, oh gosh, I have to scrap this. But there were just other things, and I write slow, y'all. I mean, it's just how it is. So, but I do wish I had known those things. And for any of our listeners who think, oh, this book is so hard, it means it's crap or whatever. That's not what it means. It means it's a hard book to write. And some books are just harder than others.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes one time I finished a book and I thought, man, I feel like I have just wrestled a bear. It's just been so hard.
Right.
But,
right.
Some of them are just that way. I don't know that I've ever had a book that's been like a dream to write.
No, I don't think been so easy. I don't think I have either. Well, and because I made it harder than it needed to be.
Yeah.
Because I did panic, and if I had known, like, just relax, it's going to work, it's going to work out, you're going to figure it out, then it would have been easier to write. But Heartbreaker was the 4th book in the Bride series. That book was probably the easiest book I've written. Probably because I knew the characters really well before. I mean, they had been in subsequent books and stuff. But even that book, I struggled. Things got hard, and I'm like, how do I get myself out of this? Or how do I write through this and get have these characters grow even more? And I think that's important too. You really want to take a story, and when you first get the idea, it's kind of this little embryo of a thing, and you want to grow it into a big living thing, and that takes work, and it takes time for some people, and it takes some sleepless nights, just thinking about it.
Yep.
How about you?
I think I wish I'd known that it's okay if each one is different, that I don't have to do it the same way each time, and that's okay. And I wish that I had known that it's, for me, a lot of it is organic, and I can have a plan and have, like those character sheets and the things that I did.
Yeah.
I had to learn that that was not how I did it, that I don't have to do it, according to this plan, that I can just do it my own way. And if it's, different every time, that's okay.
Right.
So yeah, I think that there's still so much I wish I knew about developing a story, but I think a lot of it is very, for me, it's very instinctive. And I'll be writing and I'll think, oh, at this point, I'll just know that I need something else. Like I need to really show the motivation, or I really need to show the emotion, but it's all very instinctive. And I have to be in the story, writing the story, and be at that point before I figure that out. So if I try and figure it all out before, I can't do it, but I can do it as I'm going along.
Yeah, me too.
So, and it took me a while to figure that out, because I had this idea that I would do like these, doing a huge very detailed outline, and I do better if I have a more general outline.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I think I wish I had known that, that readers, for the most part, depends on your genre, but in romance, readers care more about the characters than the plot. And sometimes I've gotten hung up on the fact that this plot is like, this doesn't make sense. This is terrible. And you want it to make sense. I mean, I'm not saying just throw something up there, but if you can make people feel something, then they will forgive you some plot holes. If you don't always get it. And if you can end a book well, like where a reader really gets you pay off the things you've set up in the beginning, they will forgive you some things that they may or may not have loved about the plot, because they want that emotional payoff at the end. And so, I mean, a thriller, even a mystery, but some books you really do need more of a plot. I mean, you need to make sure that plot doesn't have holes, that plot really carries the story. But for what I write, characters really, really carry the story.
Yeah, I agree. Even in mystery, where the plot is very important, the books that I want to read are because the characters are so compelling. So I think that carries across the board. Yeah.
Good.
Okay. Well, then what about developing a series? So does it grow out of a single idea? Because you have a series. Our series are very different.
Yeah.
But like, tell me about the Brides on the Run series. How did that come about?
Oh, no, I wrote one book and thought, this is all I'm going to write. I actually I had written half the book and went back and changed Gavin's manager to a young 30-something good-looking guy, because I thought, well, maybe I could do 2 books, I could do, and then of course Scarlett had her best friend Luann, and so Luann and Jack are in the second book. But I didn't really plan out a series. I just was like, okay,
it's going well, so let's keep going.
Yeah, well, because my critique partners at the time, Carla and Stacy, they were like, Luann should be a runaway bride. And I was like, yes, she should. But if you think about it, Scarlett's kind of a runaway bride too. And we all 3 looked at each other and went, a runaway bride series. But that was about as far as it went. I mean,
but sometimes that's all you need, just a little germ of an idea, and then you can build it out.
And thankfully I had set it in a town that people loved. The town really is as much character as, any of the other characters. And I had a Honey, a character that could carry through all the books, and be really consistent. And so that's how that one came about. It just happens to be set in a town where nobody gets married right away. I mean, there's always something that happens. The second series, I really said I was planning it out better, but as I've gotten deeper into the series, I'm like, I don't know that I planned it out as well as I should have. Like my friend Susanna Nix, who is in my brainstorming group, thank you. She just put out the first book in a new series that she's set in this small town. I think there's 6. She has basically plotted. I mean, as much as she's not a huge plotter either, but like she knows the tropes, she knows the characters, she knows, she knows how they all interconnect. She knew all of that before she read the first book. And I'm just like, wow. I'm in awe of you. And so that, kids, is how you do it. But, you can still do it the other way too. Just kind of depends on how your brain works and stuff. And there's very little you can't fix. I mean, that's just the thing. There is just very little you can't fix. Even if you put it out and it's not working and it's not what it's supposed to be, you can take it down and fix it and put it up, rename it. Be sure and tell people you've put it up before, and try to, if it's worth that to you, you can do it. Yeah. But how about you? How do you do a series?
Well, I this is why I wrote the series book, because I had no plan with my first series.
Yeah. Let's recap real quick. Sara, who wrote a series book, just asked me how I did a series. Okay. I think she set me up.
Not intentionally. But the reason I did that was because I had no idea when I started my first series. I just knew it would be a series because it was a cozy mystery, and they're always in series. Duh, of course it's a series.
Yeah.
So I had ideas for the mysteries in the books, but not for like an overarching story arc for the series. So I just kind of went on a wing and a prayer with that, and it worked out. But as I've gone along, I think I've gotten better at creating, like planning a series, because this historical that I put out, the 1920s one, I really thought about it. I was like, how can I make this more episodic?
Right.
And for me, that was the key. It was like, I knew I wanted an episodic series, which is different from maybe a series where you have a huge character arc and the character changes. I knew mine was going to be more episodic, and my character would change some, but she wouldn't have like a definite endpoint, and the story could go on. And that series, I did think about what I wanted her to do. And I was like, okay, I'm going to have these first 3 books kind of be about her figuring out she's a detective and she's good at this. The next 3 will be kind of like her getting her team around her, getting her feet, getting known. And then the next 3 will be people will be coming to her, like strangers will be coming to her. And so it's more like a very subtle, like entrepreneurial arc. So I planned those out, and I planned out the mysteries. And part of that was just because I was reading books set in the 1920s and historical stuff. And I was like, oh, I could write about a book about this. And this is interesting. That setting that, I read about the crazy parties they used to throw in the 1920s.
Yeah.
And so one of the books kind of is all about these crazy parties. So I had like different concepts and an arc for my character. So I feel like that's the most I've ever planned it out.
Right.
And I feel comfortable with that. This new series, I haven't done that, and I've tried to do it. And the most I can get in my head is like 3 books. So maybe this is just going to be a trilogy. We will see.
Yeah.
So yet again, it doesn't always, you can't do the same thing every time.
No, you can't. You can't. So the next question is, how detailed are your series ideas?
Okay. So I guess this could be taken one of 2 ways. Like how detailed do you get in the series, or how detailed do you get for each book?
Right.
And for me, that was kind of my plan for that, my most recent series. But the book ideas, I literally just had one line. Like the first one was country house mystery, and a couple of details about that. And then I had the idea of the parties. And that was all I'd put. But in my mind, I had the background. So I didn't need to do a super detailed like explanation of what those were.
Yeah.
So,
I don't really have very clearly very well thought out, detailed ideas about the series. However, with the series I'm writing, I do have, I knew like it was Homecoming King, then Duking It Out, then Queen of Hearts, and Joker's Wild. So like Small Town Royalty, I thought that was genius. I'm coming to think that maybe that is not, it may be genius, but it's not, it may be too too obscure for readers to really put that all together. I have not put a series name on Homecoming King yet because it was just one book. But I may change it to just the Rider Texas series and be done with it, because even though I think Small Town Royalty is genius, people could be disappointed when they're not actual royalty.
That might bring up they might think that it's a transplanted British person.
Absolutely. Like exiled to this small town. I don't know. So, but I do think that I want to write a series where it's like all sisters or all brothers or 4 friends or 4 enemies. I mean, whatever, 4 coworkers, whatever. I think those series, especially, or 4 teammates, I think those do really well in romance. Some of the, really popular, Megan Quinn, Amy Dawes. I mean, I could go on. Lucy Score, Claire Kingsley. They have brothers, or they have friends set in a town or whatever. And I do think that those sorts of series do real well. And sometimes that's easier because you have, like, if it's a family, you have kind of shared interest. You would have you can have arching arc for the entire family. And but I think that those are tricky to write too. I think you've got to get it right.
So there might be something to be said for the simplicity of having like something that's easily recognizable, like the sisters, the brothers, the coworkers, versus royalty, which I love. I love small town royalty.
I do too.
But it may be that you may need 3 or 4 books for it to be recognizable, for people to be like, oh, that's the Small Town Royalty series.
Or not, I don't know. So I'm kind of talking with some people to see what they think, but right now, and I don't really even have to worry about it right now. Honestly, I could put the next book out and not even have a series title.
Right.
I probably will, but just because I think that helps, on Amazon and stuff for searchability. But
I think naming a series,
and that brings up another idea. Do you link all your books together, or do you not link all your books together?
That's a question you debate, right? But for me, I think the answer is I always link them.
Yes. I think it's genre. Do you think it's genre specific?
Yeah, I think for mystery readers.
So.
Yeah.
I think so. At Romance Author Mastermind, one of the PR people looked at my page, and that was one of her suggestions, was to not put book 1, book 2, book 3. I didn't do it because that really annoys me when I'm reading a book and I go in book 3 and there are 2 others before that I could have easily read before that one. So I don't know. That's tricky. That's a good question, I think, maybe for our listeners, because do you link your series, and or don't you, and why not?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Yeah, I've always linked my books in my series because mystery readers seem to prefer starting with book 1 and reading through. Although I've had people say, they run book bubs on book 7 or 10 or 14 and do fine. But I feel like most mystery readers want to start at the beginning. So I do number mine. So, yeah.
I have one more question that we didn't write down, but it just came to me. How do you pick the best ideas?
Oh, that's hard to quantify, because sometimes you'll think you have the best idea.
Exactly.
And then you can spend a while writing it and then go, oh, that was not the best idea. But I feel like the first indie series I did, that On the Run series, I loved that personally. But as far as marketability, that was not the best series.
Right.
Because it didn't really fit anywhere specifically. Too much romance for mystery, not enough romance for romance, you know? So it was, you know, one of those that's kind of like an odd duck.
Yeah.
But I enjoyed writing it. And it was like it was something that I wanted to do. So I don't regret doing it, but that probably would have been smarter to have given that a pass, you know, and put that on the back burner, maybe later, maybe one of my passion projects later. But for me, I tend to think like, I think part of it too is like, is this a short story? Is this a novella? Is this a novel? And I tend to think, I read novels. I tend to think in novel length.
Yeah, me too.
I get ideas. It's like, I have a hard time writing short. So almost everything I come up with, I know it's either going to be a novel or it's going on the back burner.
Right.
Because I can't write it as a short story.
Right.
So,
I mean, because I've had some stories, like I have an idea. I mean, you know, I have several ideas, but I have ideas, but it's like I can't see my way to the end of it. Not that I know what's going to happen at the end of this series, but I see how they can all come together and fit together. And if I can't do that with an idea, if I'm doing a series, then I won't do it until I can see it all together. With just a book idea, I will start a book when I can't see the end. I am not afraid.
Fearless.
Well, I don't know. Fearless, stupid. It all kind of intermingles somewhere together.
Yeah. But you do get to the end. You do get to the end.
I do get to the end, and but I think there are easier ways to do it than the way I do it. And so, you know, we've had a lot of people on our show, and they have great ways of doing and writing and developing their story ideas, and you should go back and listen to all those episodes. But this is how we do it. So
I think for me, I don't most of my ideas, I do see them through. There are some that the ones that stick with me are the ones that I work on. And I feel like the ones that are I guess you'd say richer, like they have more elements, more themes. Those are the things that I feel like work better in the long run. So sometimes I'll think this is a great idea, but there's not enough there for me.
There's not enough meat on the bone yet.
Yeah.
That's a Texas phrase right there.
Yeah. What about you? So do you have any other way that you sort them out?
No, I think that's it. I think that, you know, I am overly ambitious. And so I think, oh, this is a great idea. I can do this. And then, of course, you know, I've said this before, I have these great high concept ideas and I go, oh, crap, I don't have a story. But that's not true, because there is a story there. You just have to find it. You know, you have to find it. And you got to be committed to it. You got to be committed and not bail when it gets hard, which I have done before. And it's caused me a lot of headache when I've done that. Really, I think it's easier to just push through. It's not easy, but in the long run.
But then you're done. You get it done. You have a book. Yeah.
So
anything else we want to talk about?
I don't think so. I think we've rode this horse till it's
till we're done.
Till it's done. But yeah, so I am interested though to ask our listeners, do you link your series? Because I just think that's a good question. I'd be interested to know. But anything else you can think that we want to know?
I think that's a good question. I think that's good. And then I also wanted to mention that for the plotter template that I'm doing with Ryan, we're going to be doing a Facebook Live event for that. And I don't have the date yet. I'll put it in the group. So I think it's coming up next week. So I'll put the link. Once I have a link, I'll put it in the group. Okay. So we'd love to hear kind of how you handle your series.
And your ideas even.
Maybe.
You know, if you get an idea, do you sit on it for a while until you have the whole thing thought out, or do you jump right in with the idea? So you can answer either of those questions.
Yeah. So that'll be in the Facebook group. And if you're not in there, you can just answer the questions and join and let us know what you think.
Yeah. And thanks for listening this week. It's been really fun.
Yeah. So we'll have all the show notes at wishidknownthenforwriters.com.
Mhm.
And thanks to Alexa Larberg for editing and producing the podcast. We'll see y'all next week.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Wish I'd Known Then podcast. We hope this episode inspired you, empowered you, and made you laugh a little bit too. If you loved it, tell your friends about it. And if you feel so inclined, leave us a review. We look forward to being with you again next week.